Hey, good morning. I am going to try a new series, or rather a series at all. I don't generally do video, so we're going to try this out. But I read a lot of books, and I think a lot about what I read in terms of my own experience as whatever the heck I am. Uh, let's say, for the purposes of this video, an entrepreneur with a lot of trauma-related recovery work under my belt, which extends not just to mental health, but physical health and relationship health, and everything I've had to build in my life and within myself to create capacity to go out into the world and do things that I want to do, whether that's having a job, a real job, or whether that's coming out and doing my entrepreneurial work or things that I really enjoy doing. There's been a lot of capacity building, a lot of healing, a lot of regulation. And so for this next phase of my virtual assistant business, which is really up-leveling into what I really do when I work with people, I'm just starting to name it better, which is sitting down and figuring out how to get from point A to point B in a way that really works. And that can and does often look like a multi-level analysis. And most people hire a virtual assistant or an assistant of any kind and are just kind of looking at, help me get things done, which is very fair. That is fundamentally what needs to happen on the implementation side. But I'm also looking at, how do we get things done in your business in a way that is effective for the goal, sustainable for the energy and the money and everything available to it, and that's actually going to help you as a building block for your next stage. So this is where I'm always looking at things, and so I've really packaged my services now in a way to really get to that. You can work with me on just a get things done level, but you can also work with me on a more strategic level to say, okay, this needs to get done, but how am I going to do it? Not just as a business person, but as a person, considering my environment, my relationships, my commitments, my health, my mental health, my work that I'm doing in therapy to heal my bad childhood. Like, how do we take this dream or this goal that entrepreneurs and small business owners have, this desire to succeed? I think a lot of us have this inborn, innate growth mindset, so we might have a lot of challenges or obstacles, but it doesn't really hold us back. It temporarily makes things hard. It can make things take a lot longer than we wanted to. It can be incredibly frustrating. It can be very discouraging. But at the same time, if you are listening to me and you know what I mean, you probably also know there's just this innate sense that it's not going to stop us. We just have to figure out a way to move forward. And if that's you, I would love it if you just keep continuing to watch the video, and if anything resonates with you, give me a call. But the thing I've been doing lately is reading this new book. It's called The Mountain Is You, and it's backwards, by Brianna Wiest. And there's a lot of things in these books that I find both inspiring and potentially problematic or challenging. And I think about this in terms of, if somebody had told me some of these things 20 years ago, I'd probably be in a better spot, at least to think about. So I thought I would bring it to you and see if we can think about it. I'm going to do a chapter by chapter. Today's the introduction. And I'm just going to share with you my thoughts. So my initial thoughts on this book are, I think it's going to be a very inspiring book, and I think it's going to have a lot of really great information and nuggets of information and things that are going to be really helpful. I think the biggest point in the introduction chapter is, you are here because a trigger showed you to your wound, and your wound will show you to your path, and your path will show you to your destiny. And I think for so many of us self-healing entrepreneurial people out there, that probably resonates. At least in my life, I keep coming up against things that hurt, and then I have to work through, and it gets a little exhausting, honestly. But it gets better over time, and it really does lead to where I need to be. And I become grateful for those experiences, even when they're difficult. And so this is really important. But my key thoughts on this first introduction chapter, she talks a lot about nature. Her first line is, much like nature, life is very often working in our favor, which by and large I agree with. But there's this idea that we will lead, or at least as she puts it, the idea that we will somehow be led to a positive disintegration. A positive disintegration is where we come up against a crisis point, things fall apart, but they fall apart in a way that we can do better, or as she says, release and renew our self-concept. And this can happen in a way that we can let go of things that have been holding us back, and we can embrace a new way of being. And this is a really important thing. And it can be a really difficult thing to go through emotionally and psychologically and physically. But it's a very human thing, not just for all of us trauma survivors, but it's a very human experience. And in the best of times, it can really help us be exactly who we need to be. What I see missing from this book so far in these ideas are that in order to have a positive disintegration, we do have to have some level of capacity. And so I look at this from both a healing and a performance mindset, that what we're talking about is, in order to make those positive shifts forward and allow this to be, or have this be, a positive disintegration, as opposed to cycling, just getting back into the cycle of a huge stressor, and then maybe a point of opportunity where we can change, but instead of changing, we go back into the cycle and double back down on the behaviors that have been harmful, or the old coping mechanisms that don't help us anymore. What we need is the capacity to change. And the capacity to change has so much to do with our physical ability to regulate our nervous systems. And this is, I think, a big topic these days. When I was first starting out in my trauma therapy recovery stuff, it was all about the talk therapy. It was all about just getting your emotions out, as if somehow that was going to help. And people have learned in the years since that doesn't necessarily help. Like, we can talk all we want, or we can feel the emotions all we want, unless we have the physical ability to release that from our body, we stay stuck in these nervous system patterns. And so one of the things I see missing from the book is really just the acknowledgement that, yeah, this is an inspiring introduction, and she wants us to head towards positive integration. And she is saying that it is natural for there to be times of struggle that lead to positive integration, and that her metaphor of the mountain is, she says, like so much of nature, mountains provide us with an inherent wisdom about what it will take to rise up to our highest potential. And I agree. There's also the moment when you are not regulated and do not have capacity, where the mountain can feel so overwhelming that it immediately flips you back into a nervous system dysregulation, and you are not in any state to be able to harness this energy. So there's some things here that not that I disagree at all with what she's saying, but I think from a trauma-informed perspective, and that's where I want to bring this book. I think there's a lot of really great stuff in here, and I want to read it. I want to use it. And I also, at this point in my life, always try to be very trauma-informed and say, okay, in order to use it, in order to actually elevate this from just an inspiring book that I read to principles that I can put in practice, what do I need to know here from a trauma-informed perspective, and from a perspective of just being able to be a healed person in the world as opposed to continuing to trigger myself into some patterns. Because the other point that I'd like to share before I close when I read these books is that so many of the self-help books do feel very inspiring, but I think there's a double-edged sword there. At least for me, as I've read hundreds, thousands of these over the years and have gotten a lot from each one of them, and yet still have some chronic struggles due to this past trauma and the nature of the healing of that, especially without a lot of trauma-informed resources over the years and a lot of bad guidance about how to do it. Like, I've been stuck a lot of times, and it can make you feel bad. It makes me feel bad that I'm not in a better place, or that I haven't figured this out yet, or that I need to keep going over this. And I think the other perspective to bring to these types of books is understanding where you are in relationship to the material. I am at a place now where I do have a lot of capacity, and positive disintegration is something that happens regularly in my life as opposed to getting stuck back in my patterns. But if I was reading this even, 10 years ago for sure, if I was reading this 10 years ago, I would have had a different experience with it. It would have been very inspiring, but it also would have made me feel a lot of pressure that, yes, like this makes sense. This resonates. I believe this. Why can't I actually do this? And it can really collapse back in on a person into the self-judgment, and to make it seem like, well, I must be fundamentally doing something wrong, that I can't get to this place and I can't harness these ideas. So the other thing to really bring to bear here is, what is the environment in which we live in internally? What is our internal level of regulation, skill, and our ability to be safe? And how much foundational safety do we have in our body, in our physical body, in terms of our ability to just get in there and allow ourselves to calm down and allow ourselves to feel safe. And that is very correlated to our external environment as well. How many relationships do we have with people, whether that's business or personal, that make us feel bad about ourselves, or make us feel unsafe, or make us feel like we're having to prove something? In the job that we do every day, or the partners we have, or the people that we interact with, are we safe? Or are we being fed back this loop of information that's triggering these old patterns, which makes our internal landscape unsafe? And then when we go to read these books, or we try to sit down and do our business, or we go to our job, or we try to be successful in our endeavors in life, whatever we're passionate about, are we bringing all of that into this space and then just stressing ourselves out? For a lot of years, I just had a pattern of great idea and then a lot of energy for the idea, and I would put a lot into it. I'd make resources for it, or I'd do a lot of work with it, or I'd try to sell an idea, or I'd try to make something, or I'd write something, and I'd try to put it out there. But by the time I was done with it, I was exhausted and I couldn't get it completed. And I was just repeating this cycle that I've gotten myself out of finally, that I knew the only way I could do it is if I harnessed the energy I had right now. And so I tried to do it, which led to burnout upon burnout upon burnout, which led to me feeling like I was failing over and over and over again. None of that was very helpful. And in retrospect, what it was being in a chronically unsafe nervous system, in a chronically unsafe environment, where the message was not so much what I thought I was doing was trying to be successful for me. What I was actually doing was trying to escape a really bad place. I felt really bad where I was, and I just wanted to get out of it. And so I would see an opportunity to get out of it, and I would try really hard, kind of like, I don't know, an animal in a trap, I suppose. You put everything you have in there, and then you exhaust yourself. And it takes a while to recover from that and try again. And if we keep trying and we keep doing the same thing over and over again, we just keep getting the same results, of course, right? You just keep trying the quick fix. It doesn't work. You get exhausted and you have to rest for a while. And I think there's going to be a lot in this book, The Mountain Is You, that will really address getting out of that type of cycle in general. That when we go to positive disintegration, and when we finally see that we are that animal in the cage, is when we can let go of it. That's a positive disintegration. There's a lot of potential work that goes into letting that go. There's a lot of self-concept, a lot of self-esteem. There's a lot of relationship work, potentially, that goes into letting something like that go. But once we see it, we can move forward. And I think that is what is going to be, the inspiring message of this book. And there's going to be a lot of good stuff in here about that. And at the same time, to ground it back to, we have to be realistic about where we actually are in order to harness that, and to be very compassionate with ourselves, that we aren't here for no reason. My parting thought is, wherever you are right now, you're not there for no reason. You didn't spontaneously arrive here. There are a lot of things in life that we can control that are ours, but most things in life we can't. They're not ours. We only can control how we perceive them to a certain level, if we have the capacity to change our perceptions. And for the most part, our biggest leverage point is we can control how we respond. We can try not to react. We can try to respond, and we can try to respond according to our own values and make the best decisions we can at the time. And we can only do that, again, if our nervous system is regulated, because if it's not, we have to react, because that's how we're wired as biological human beings. We cannot escape our environment. We cannot escape our biology. And any of the self-help books or materials or people out there who are trying to bypass the basic fact that we are biological human beings who are mostly in relationship with our own bodies, are going to miss about 90% of what it takes to actually, if you are a recovering trauma entrepreneur like me, that's going to miss about 90% of what it actually takes to be successful and to get what's happening in life. And that's just something that I think you only know if you know. So anyway, I don't know if this is helpful, but hopefully it is. I'm going to keep going through this chapter by chapter. I'm going to put it out. We're going to see. Everybody take care.